conversations or your conversations, is he committed to relieving this situation in the Middle East in a fair and just way?
Well, I think
Ayan siya guys, magandang gabi sa ating lahat. Dito naman tayo sa ating
in
balitang
the situation. He's used his
Attack
influence and
Iran
power
and
in situations
Israel.
we've just seen it in Iran. And again, to repeat myself,
Itong balita ngayon
does create
guys,
the possibility
magandang
moving
gabi sa
forward
ating
here.
lahat.
And look, there is a moral imperative to move
Lagi
forward.
tayo
There's
ng
also an
antabayanan sa ating balita
as you intimated,
araw-araw
the pathway
para
to
tayo
ultimate
ay
peace. This is not going to lead to ultimate peace in the region unless Gaza is stabilized and then ultimately on a path towards a Palestinian state.
Commander, Prime Minister Carney, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
para tayo ay may update sa ating hinihintay na mga news sa pangyayari sa paligid natin sa buong mundo. Ayan, shout out, magandang gabi sa ating lahat. Ayan, saan muna tayo guys.
At the X-25 in Osaka, and within its earthquake. After exploring the Israel city, I wanted to dive into how it was made, hands-on. This led me to nearby Qatar, and with the locals, we learned to make relax. We connected with them as we shared our life stories with each other. My next trip to Tokushima to continue to the mountains to summarize old home passed between forests and rivers. Sitting peacefully by the Yogi, I shared a homemade meal and lunch. What was life like for him 7 years ago? Japan isn't just a place to visit. It's a story you live, one incredible chapter at a time.
Appreciate the world. We witnessed something today that nobody alive has ever seen before. Follow the facts. What they do, how far we have to go. Other than every day, the world is yet to make these places sacrifice.
Now, as tensions in the Middle East remain extremely high, European leaders, much like Canadian Prime Minister Carney, are also calling for diplomacy, imploring Iran and the United States to re-engage directly. The EU's chief diplomat Attack Qatar says lines of communication need to be kept open, as well as taking down temperature in the Middle East. Ukraine is firmly at the top of her agenda.
Ayan, shout out 3 million in our house. Thank you for coming, Miguel Shout. Kung makikita yung nangyari, ayan, makikita yan sa ating news. Yung nasisirang daanan ng ano.
Okay, Carlos, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the program. First, let me get your reaction to what appears to be a fragile yet set ceasefire now between Israel and Iran. President Trump reiterating that, quite emotional this morning in his anger and frustration with both sides. But it does appear that the ceasefire is in place. Your reaction?
Well, the ceasefire is in place, although both parties seem to be violating it, but I think it's important and it shows that we need the diplomacy to work, because any ceasefire needs to have also conditions so that both parties know when the other party is violating. And we have offered this path to diplomacy. We have had contacts with both parties and are willing to do so also on our behalf.
Ahead of the U.S. strikes over the weekend, you actually held talks with the Iranian foreign minister on Friday. You posted on X at the time calling these talks direct and honest discussions. And then following that, President Trump told reporters before taking off, before the U.S. jets took off to bomb Iran, he said Iran doesn't want to speak to Europe, they want to speak to us. Europe is not going to be able to help on this one. What is your reaction to that, and what role, if any, are you willing and able to provide to maintain the ceasefire?
Well, everybody has their own role. If you think back to the JCPOA, I mean, Europe was the one conducting these negotiations. And of course, when we had the talks with Foreign Minister Araki, then it was clear that we have other issues besides the nuclear. I mean, there are cyber attacks, hybrid attacks against European countries, European people detained, also their help to Russia in this war against Ukraine. So there were a lot of issues, also the ballistic missile program. So there were a lot of issues that we raised, and also Iran said that they are open to discuss with us. So definitely we need to see this path of diplomacy, and of course, everybody has their own role. United States as well as the European Union.
And obviously, that is not the only war in the region right now. The ongoing war in Gaza has raised a lot of questions and perhaps even an opportunity within Israel, within the opposition, and I know military figures that I've spoken with as well, that perhaps this will open the door to finally seeing a resolution to the war there and end to the war and return of the hostages. Even the opposition leader Yair Lapid posted on X, now in Gaza, this is the moment to close that front as well. To bring the hostages home, to end the war, Israel needs to start rebuilding. How optimistic are you that this ceasefire could lead to an end to the war in Gaza?
Hello, shout out 7 million in the house. Thank you for coming. Miguel, dito tayo antabayanan natin ang mga balita sa ating paligid, guys. Kasi nag-declare si President Trump magsi-ceasefire na daw sa dalawang kampo. Ayun, kung makikita marinig nyo yung ang balita natin sa ating TV host. Ayan. Si President Trump is nasa Dahig, Netherlands. Doon siya nagtalumpati. Ayan, kung makikita nyo ang nag-travel si President Donald Trump sa Dahig. Sa Dahig NATO. Yun ang doon siya nagpunta. Kaya doon siya nag-declare ceasefire sa dalawang kampo. Sana nga sa tinatalumpati niya, sana makinig ang mga dalawang kampo. Kasi kawawa naman ang mga residents, mga residente, guys, natatakot na sila. Kagaya nangyari sa Qatar kagabi, naatake ang Iran sa Qatar, sa airbase ng Qatar. Kasi sa airbase ng Qatar, dyan ang malaking airbase dyan sa Qatar. Parang yan ang sentro. Yan ang daming namatay, guys. Kung makikita nyo yan sa TV, ang daming namatay.
Let's talk about the NATO summit in the Netherlands today. Ukraine high on the agenda.
Sana success ang guys, ang
President Zelensky said that Russia is trying to
submit ni President Trump sa ceasefire. Kawawa kasi ang mga tao, guys, yung mga residente. Natilat sila ay natatakot sa nangyayari.
Are you seeing anything significant though in terms of tangible help?
Yeah. Well, Putin is not the
Ayan, shout out 2 million and 25 million in the house. Thank you for coming, Miguel. Shout out. Ayan, si President Donald Trump nasa Dahig, Netherlands. Doon siya nagtalumpati sa NATO Dahig, Netherlands. Ni Netanyahu dumating, si Presidente Netanyahu dumating sa
Do you see an opportunity here?
Nag-uusap na sila guys para yung dalawang kampo para huminto sila. Kawawa kasi guys ang mga residente natatakot sila guys. Kagaya kahapon sa nangyari sa Qatar, hindi nila alam kung saan sila lalabas ng mall. Kasi yung nangyari, yung iba nasa loob ng mall. Ayan, tuloy. Dami natatakot. Umiiyak yung mga kababayan natin, natatakot na sila. Pero sa ngayong araw, ngayong gabi na to, wala tayo narinig na kung may operation pa ngayong gabi sa Qatar. Wala pa man guys, wala pang atake ngayon. Sana nga guys, ang declare ni President Trump na ceasefire, sana nga guys successful.
But of course, we can see that all these moves taking attention away from.
Kasi maraming prime minister na nag-uusap-usap na sila guys para tulungan sila yung para mag-uusap sila. Ayan, President Donald Trump traveled Tuesday for a consequential summit of NATO leaders. He'll arrive to think of freshly brokers ceasefire. His hope can prove to his skeptics.
Well, this is a very ambitious goal. That is
Sana approve yan guys.
is agreed in 2014
Sa
that this by 2024 is going to be 2%
sa ginawa
of
ni
GDP for every NATO country.
President
And now,
Donald Trump.
The discussion is about 5%. It is
Yan na guys.
increase, but the time
Viral yun siya guys. Viral to siya sa talumpati ni President Donald Trump. Ayan. Sa early Tuesday niya sinasabi. Ayan.
It's very hard to explain to public why we have to spend all that
Donald
money.
Trump said a ceasefire had begun. Ayan siya guys.
Develop the capabilities, then
Kasi dito tayo ay may manood sa mga balita
the aggressors would not look our way.
And we know President
sa
Trump
mga
has been pushing to meet that 5% goal and has taken issue
kapaligiran
on his
natin.
way to the summit, speaking out against Spain specifically for their pushback on attaining that goal. How important, finally, is it for President Trump to have a one-on-one meeting
Naviral
with
yan siya
President
guys sa
Zelensky? They were scheduled to
buong
meet at
mundo
G7, in
sa
Canada
talumpati
last week, and
ni
obviously
President
the Middle East
Donald
changed
Trump.
that. How important is it for the two of them to meet once again here?
Basahin natin of the ceasefire. Israeli military intercept 2 missile launch from Iran at Israel. An Israel Defense Force official told CNN. Yan.
Russia, Iran, but also more publicly China and North Korea.
Yan. Sana guys successful ang sinabi ni President Donald Trump.
When it comes to all of these actors.
Okay, Carlos, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it.
Kasi nga guys, natatakot ang mga tao. Kahit dito sa amin banda guys, natatakot din ang mga tao. Natatakot din ang mga tao dito banda sa atin. Yung nag-alert na guys. Kami rin nag-alert na rin. Nag-aayos ng mga gamit. Baka sakali na mamatake sila dito ang Iran. Kasi doon man guys, ang tinitirahan kasi yan guys. Ang atakihin nila yan yung airbase. Kaya nga guys, na atake nila ang Qatar kasi doon ang malaking airbase, parang sentro ng airbase ng US airbase sa Qatar. Kaya yun, ang Qatar ang punterya nila kagabi. Buti pagtapon nila ng missile guys, hindi tumama sa atakihin nila. Kasi yung Qatar, wanda man sila, hindi tumama sa nila yung yung missile tumama sa dagat.
What has been hit here, we have seen
Yung
the warning
ceasefire. Yan.
from the soldiers already die. I can't imagine
Magulo
what
yung
it's been like for you growing up without your mother. We're not just here for our family, but for freedom, democracy.
Tumama sa dagat yung missile. Hindi tumama doon sa punteriya nila kung saan ang gusto nila atakihin. Pero sa awa ng Diyos guys, hindi tumama sa atakihin nila, tumama sa dagat. Kasi humarang ang hinarang ng Qatar. Hindi tumama. Parang 7 ata guys, tumama sa dagat. Pero malaking kabog, mga kababayan natin natatakot na sila. Yan. Ayan, viral yung sinabi ni Presidente Trump kay ceasefire. Yan, kung makikita nyo yan, ang nangyayari. Yan.
Iranian retaliation once again, and that everything that was in what they call the occupied territories, of course, meaning all of Israel would then become a target for Iran. Tough language coming out of Tehran here as well. Also, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, of course, is that lead wing of Iran's military, claiming that there were several violations of its soil, as they put it, by the Israelis, possibly meaning incursion by some sort of aircraft in the hours after the ceasefire went into effect.
Ayan, viral yung sinabi ni yan si President Donald Trump. Nasa dahig yan siya guys. NATO, dahig Netherlands. Doon yun siya. Yan, nakita nyo diba si President Donald Trump.
Air Force planes streaking, what seems to be Israeli Air Force planes streaking past, and then extremely loud explosions rocking our building, and then rocking also a lot of other places in central Tehran as well. We saw a lot of outgoing anti-aircraft gunfire coming from the Iranians. The skies here over the city really were illuminated. That went on for the better part of, I would say, about half an hour, 45 minutes, maybe up to an hour, where those loud bangs continued. The Israelis at some point issued evacuation orders for certain
Ayan na, US President Donald Trump said early Tuesday that a ceasefire between Israel and Iran was now in effect. Buti naman guys, epektado na lang sinabi ni Donald Trump. In-accept na nila guys. Yan, kung makikita yun.
Projectiles they say have been fired from Iran towards Israeli territory.
Thanks for that, Patrick.
Yeah.
We also want to show you images there. You see live images of Air Force One arriving in Amsterdam. The president coming for the NATO summit. Obviously, a lot of issues to be discussing. Not only the crisis
nasa Amsterdam, Netherlands siya.
but obviously the ongoing war in Ukraine. And we'll be covering the NATO summit for you as well. Well, the escalating
Yes, Trump arrived in the Netherlands for NATO summit. Ayan. Doon siya na guys, doon siya na-arrive sa NATO.
Now, for many relatives of Evans incarcerated, that
guys.
was their worst nightmare, fearing for the safety of their loved ones being held there. In a letter to the head of Iran's judiciary last week, a group of detainees called for a temporary release of prisoners until the fighting stops.
Viral to sa guys sa sinabi ni sa talumpati ni President Donald Trump.
Shiva, thank you so much for taking the time. We appreciate you joining the show. In terms of the structural damage to Evans Prison, how much do you know about how much damage was done in these strikes to the prison itself? Was it just the gates to the prison, or was there more structural damage to the building itself?
No, it wasn't just the gate, actually. The main kitchen, the clinic, the small clinic that the prison had was destroyed. Lots of glasses were broken. Some of the mail.
Dami daw nasira.
So it wasn't just the entrance. And I have to say that when you say, was it just the entrance? Imagine you're in prison and all of a sudden the door of the prison gets
Malungkot
attacked
yung
because
nagsasalita
they
guys
don't know
parang
what's
umiiyak.
happening, and it's horrifying for the
Kasi
prisoners
dami daw
inside prison
damage.
and being attacked.
What have you heard about
Parang siya ay umiiyak.
to these strikes to the prison itself? And what do you know about any specifics regarding casualties? You just gave a brief
Parang siya ay
example.
umiiyak guys yung nagsasalita. Yung anong
Well, the thing is, like, we don't know. As you know, the regime does not release any sort of real number of how many people were killed or injured. We have this information.
dami daw injury
Political prisoners or families that were told by the children
sa
or
mga
how many
residente.
people were injured. That's all we know about it. But what we know that they were quite distressed. I'm saying they were because right now the female political prisoners were taken to Qatar prison, which is the biggest women prison in the Middle East. Very well known, infamous for this situation. And the men are taken forcibly to fragility prison, which is again
Ayan, kung makikita nyo yan yung ating news.
by the United States.
Klaro diba guys?
Known for their horrifying situation. So they are
Ayan.
actually very stressed on one hand. They don't know what's going on. And the regime
Siyempre naman stress ang mga tao.
in the middle of the night, the regime took lots of
Na may
buses
mga
and
taong
drove them
ayaw
to
yung
prison and
mag-away-away.
took them to
May mga
police
tao
prison
man gusto
without
mong away.
informing them,
Ayan.
which is kind of like forced
Dami na
discipline,
stress
and also
kapaligiran.
the family
Hindi
of
lang
the
sa dalawang
families of
kampo
the other
ang
side,
nasa-stress.
because there is no
Sa ibang lugar din nasa-stress ang mga tao. Kasi naawa sila sa mga residente na sila ay natatakot.
And currently they all there. So the problem is that, as you know, the internet
53 million the house. Thank you for coming. Mega love shoutout. Magandang gabi sa atin lahat. Shoutout, shoutout. Iyan. Makinig tayo sa mga balita sa ating paligid.
When we say casualty, it's not
Ayan.
about just the physical damage and injury. It's the horrifying kind of psychological torture of these prisoners. I know that because in the
Dami daw injuries guys.
when I was a teenager,
Paano na
in
yun?
the time of war between Iran and Iraq, and I was injured. So it's horrifying to be in prison and be targeted. So this is not acceptable at all. One more thing, the regime uses
Tapos kasi ang plano ng Iran guys
exile prisoners to
about sa mga
that are holding
di ba doon galing ang mga gas
who were arrested for murder,
sa buong
fraud,
mundo
etc.
sa
It's
Iran.
quite dangerous. It's not just the attack. It's
Kasi
what
kung
it
hindi
follows.
huminto ang mga away ng mga yan, dalawang panig.
What's gonna happen to these prisoners?
Yung ibang lugar,
Worried about are they gonna be
hindi sila makapasok doon sa Iran niya kasi doon daanan kumukuha ng
basically damaged
gas.
psychologically, physically.
So kasi kung may dumaan doon,
Later. We know that
kumukuha ng gas kasi maski doon ang daanan sa Iran.
a few hours after that,
Eh,
the judiciary announced that they gonna
baka mamaya
basically have a different, much faster
atakihin
process
nila ang dumadaan doon na magdala ng gas, kumuha ng gas doon sa Iran. Kasi doon ang galing ng mga gas.
But this is the way they want to get rid of the political prisoners.
Yeah,
So I guess what I'm trying to say, yeah, this is beyond.
Kaya yan ang Iran guys, hindi mag-surrender. Kaya dapat yun ang
When
gagawin.
you first heard about these strikes, what was your immediate reaction?
It's too
Samahan mo
close to
ako
my
rito.
heart. I lost my best friend in the same attack. So I can't even look at
Masaya ako, kunti na yung kanin.
that the
Magkain ka na?
at the entrance of the prison.
Eh, tuyo.
Have to imagine, this is nothing symbolic about it.
Ha? Araw-araw ako kumakain ng manok. Ay. Eh di kumuha ka ng hotdog doon. Ayan na, yung nagsasalita yan guys, yung babae na yan, yung parang malungkot siya, parang umiiyak, pero
been in prison.
Kakayanin niya na lang guys magsasalita.
The problem is that right now, the regime from the very first day, 13th of June, when the attack started, they brought lots of security forces on the street. We have to remember
Yeah,
that
no.
Iran are in two wars, the attack by Israel and also the attack by the security forces of the regime.
A regime that's in
60 million in the house. Thank you for coming, Miguel. Shout out. Ayan. Makinig tayo sa mga balita sa ating TV host.
Political prisoners and those activists in the country that remain.
Yan. Nakalagay doon. O nabasa nyo diba? Trump arrives in the Netherlands for NATO summit. Ayan. Doon sa
They are
Netherlands.
being checked constantly inside the prison. In some of the prison, actually, they don't even give them food. In two other cities, even in Islamabad prison, another one that
Success in Iran in a statement on behalf of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu government. Yan.
And these are what we don't see on the news, unfortunately.
Sana nga guys para sila ay huminto na sa pag-aaway. Kawawa din ang mga residente. Yan na si Trump. Kita niya yan, lumalabas na siya. Yan, kita niya si Presidente Trump. Yan, nilagay niya yung sombrero niya, bumaba na siya. Yan, nakita niyo yan sa screen. Sa TV host natin, ayan. Yan, siya yan guys. Si Presidente Donald Trump yan siya guys. Yan, bumaba yan siya. May naghintay sa kanya dyan sa baba, na sasakyan.
We don't want anyone to rescue us. I think 3 years ago, people in Iran proved that they are capable of overthrowing the Islamic regime.
Dami naghintay sa kanya guys.
Around the world, including the US and Israeli government, they are actually not doing what they're supposed to do, meaning basically kicking out all their diplomats, kicking IRGCs.
51 million in the house. Thank you for coming, Miguel. Shout
It's
out.
not just about nuclear program. People never wanted a nuclear bomb.
Marcelo Pahuay, hi. Mag-comment ka doon sa sa iba kung para
But at the same time, they get attacked in prison.
mabalikan tayo.
Execution is gonna come very
Yan,
soon.
si Donald Trump yan siya guys. Ayan, may naghintay sa kanya. Yan, nasakay na sasakyan.
Created a massacre, killed thousands of political prisoners in the summer of 1988. We are
Yeah.
very fearful that similar thing might happen.
Yan si
when
Donald
all
Trump
the
yan
media
siya
is
guys.
concentrating only on the attack and the voice of political prisoners and their family are not heard. The activists
Mabuti.
inside Iran are constantly being
Open to
threatened.
free political
What are your
prisoners.
biggest concerns going
Yan yung
forward now, given the fragility
TVOs
of
natin yun,
ceasefire,
yung
given the
mababang buhok
humiliation
niya.
that the Iranian regime
Hello, hello, Sir Brandon. Miguel shout out. Ayan, makinig tayo sa mga balita.
very brave, but
Pakinggan natin ang ating TV host.
both out of prison and still within the country itself at large.
Well, my biggest fear is that the regime stays in
Yes, Sir Marlon. Shout out. Hello.
massacring not just political prisoners, arresting more people as they
Yan,
have
oh.
done in the last 10 days.
Tuting.
The problem is right now that I think we have to
Freshly
understand
broker.
the Israeli government saying why do you not come
Bukan
on the
prop
street
to.
and overthrow the regime? It doesn't work.
Order disagreement. Disagreement source on both leaders. New York City Mayor primary campaign till assessment going into election day is
My biggest fear is not
68 million viewers. Thank you for coming, Miguel. Shout out.
is the Islamic regime being emboldened and start attacking people further and further.
Yan yung babaeng nagsalita, yung parang umiiyak.
They say that we're gonna put lots of people on trial and execute them because they collaborated with the Israeli regime. So this is my biggest fear. It's not a atomic bomb.
Which is why so many people are
Parang siya umiiyak nung nagsasalita siya guys.
talking about regime change right now. is something that is not only quite alarming.
Yun ang
but
proposal yan ni
the inside is
President Donald Trump, guys.
Want to overthrow the Islamic regime.
Hi!
Must have
Dali mo naman yun sa kusina, sabi ng nanay mo.
Then I was in prison when I was 15 years old.
Saan punta?
My question is, do you think international
May mga sasakyan, hindi sila aalis? Pupunta pa lang kami ng Abinyos, ngayon lang lumabas dito kay galing sa old
72 million viewers. Thank you for coming. Mega love shoutout. Ayan. Basahin nyo yan ano yung nakahilirang litra yan sa baba. Ayan.
Nagbabagdak? Oo. Nagba kami doon? Na ayaw niya yan? Mas alam? Ayaw niya yan.
Ayan. Ayan so guys, magpatalastas pa tayo sa ating TV host. Ayan mga kulot-kulot. Ayan, mega love shout out 59 million viewers in our house. Thank you for coming, mega love shout out. Magandang gabi. Ayan. Patalastas pa yung ano guys. Ayan. Buti nga guys, wala pa tayong narinig ngayong gabi na atake na sila sa Qatar. Parang wala na guys. Kasi kagabi yung attack nila sa Qatar. Kawawa yung mga residente doon. Hindi nila alam ang gagawin nila. Kasi nasa mall pa sila yung iba.
We gave you 2 pieces of advice. Don't look at the wheel. Speed is your friend.
Yes. I think that's probably a little bit for that. Don't be where you are. Look at it.
Ayan, 63 million in the house. Thank you for coming. Miguel love shout out.
There is, we're surrounded by the Cape Floral Kingdom, which is the most abundant floral kingdom on earth. It is so beautiful. There's incredible mountains. There's really something to do for everyone.
Did the re-election of Donald Trump play any role in your decision to resign? Why do you need to study it? Sounds like the facts are on your finger.
There really is much more reasons than dividends. Watch The Lead tonight on CNN.
On North Coast Live, we cover it all, from legal battles. At least one juror has now been excused from political showdowns. How much do you think that weighs on the president and the conversations in between? Way from Washington, way with your question. Would you take this all the way to the Supreme Court?
I'm not refuting a syllable of what you said.
What do you say, people who are looking to find their voice? All the news, all over North Coast Live, Tuesday through Saturday on CNN.
25 years of Inside Africa. Celebrate its culture.
73 million in the house. Thank you for coming. Miguel love shout at magandang gabi. Good evening sa atin lahat. Good evening all.
Stories.
The first fact I want to have is to show real Africa.
The trailblazers, the youth, Africa's present and future. Celebrate Inside Africa in association with Zenith Bank.
Under what authority would members of the military be able to arrest people inside the United States? So parents should not expect to know what causes autism from what a criminal street. President, did you ask President Putin to meet with you about Ukraine?
72 million viewers. Thank you for coming. Miguel love shout out.
If passed, would add trillions of dollars to the federal deficit.
Washington. SARS. Ayan.
price levels.
Ikot eh. Ikot. Milisa tayo.
A very warm share of your scholars. Tonight, a high-stakes meeting. U.S. President Donald Trump arrives in Hague for a crucial NATO summit as he rebukes both Israel and Iran just hours after
77 viewers, thank you for coming. Mega love shout out. Ayan. Manood kayo ng news, balita sa ating paligid.
Prime Minister Netanyahu, I discussed with news officials. But first this hour, just hours after his extraordinary outburst in Israel and Iran, Donald Trump has now touched down as we saw in the Netherlands, where the head of NATO says another big success is awaiting him. The US President arrived in Amsterdam while he left 5 minutes or so ago to a meeting with the king and queen at the Royal Palace before heading to the NATO summit. Hey, before the past, what was known as the Trump's call to Israel and Iran as a violation of the ceasefire he had announced.
Ayan, 71 viewers, thank you for coming. Mega love shout out. Ayan, pakinggan niyo sabi niya.
When I say, okay, maybe at $12, you don't go after the first hour and just drop everything you have on. So I'm not happy with that. I'm not happy with Iran either. But I'm really unhappy if Israel's going after the morning because the one rocket that didn't land that we've got, perhaps by mistake, that did land. I'm not happy about that. Well, we have basically a few countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Do you understand that?
Well, shortly after that, Mr. Trump posted a very flattering message to his people. However, thanks to him for his quote, decisive action in Iran. He says it was something no one else dared to do and makes us safer. He also credited Mr. Trump with getting Europe to raise defense spending, saying it will be your way. And yet, despite Mr. Trump's insistence that Iran's nuclear facilities have been completely demolished, his words, we still don't know. The IEA doesn't even know that Iran moved nuclear weapons to uranium to a state location because before it was the massive US strikes. Mr. Trump also raised eyebrows today with comments on NATO's cornerstone Article 5. Have a listen to this.
Hi, Sir Marlon. Shout out.
Depends on your definitions, numerous definitions of Article 5, you know, but I'm committed to being their friends. You know, I've become friends with many of those leaders, and I'm committed to helping them.
Your comments just now about Article 5, that will probably make some people in Europe concerned. Can you clarify what you mean? Are you still committed to mutual defense?
I'm committed to saving lives. I'm committed to life and safety. And I'm going to give you an exact definition when I get there. I just don't want to do it in the back of an airplane.
Well, the Article 5 is not about conflict, it's about what we need to defend back. A lot to cover this hour here with us, speaking of National Festival team, just 7 years ago from Washington. Jeff, great to see you. President Trump, as we showed the image of you as arriving in Amsterdam for the last few days, taking credit, I think it's fair to say, for brokering peace between Israel and Iran. This after scolding, as we play there, both Iran and Israel, really showing, I think it's fair to say, the frustration that has gotten to this point. But we've also heard the last few moments from the Israeli military chief who said that the significant phase is over the campaign against Iran is not. So just speak to how the president's framing is doing it.
Well, look, that frustration was clear by anyone listening, even reading this list, using the F word there. It was frustration, no doubt, but it was also perhaps a bit of a message to both countries, that to Israel, his displeasure, no question, but to Iran as well, making a case that the U.S. president is trying to be somewhat of a the main priority for the U.S. President and the White House is to turn the page from this.
Yung nagkomento yan guys.
All of this happened really in a 40-hour period from the bombing to the announcement of a ceasefire. Of course, history shows us that a ceasefire is very complicated. So we will see if it holds. It's fragile, no question. But what we said at the very beginning, I think, is also driving some of this. And that is still the unanswered question to all of this. What is the state of the Iranian nuclear program? There's a sense of frustration at the White House, a sense of defensiveness from the president. That's what some of this anger was also directed at. Some of the mere questioning about was the nuclear program in the sites obliterated.
So ngayon wala tayo narinig kung may atake pa ngayon sa Qatar.
The defense officials are not either. So we are going to have the immediate, the damage assessment, and that is going to be more of a picture of the nuclear program going forward here. So you get the sense that the White House is trying to move beyond that matter, and the intel briefing on Capitol Hill here in Washington being abruptly delayed until later this week also raises some questions about this. So certainly the president was eager to have a ceasefire agreement in his back pocket, if you will, as he went to meet with the NATO leaders. He's on his way right now to the first meeting, but the actual progress of the ceasefire is still very much an open question. Not to discount what's happening. It's an extraordinary bit of a dysfunction, no doubt, but it's hard to imagine a straight line of the full ceasefire.
Yeah, and I'm not opposed, I'm sure many different options go for a ceasefire, getting a ceasefire easier, maintaining it the half half, which then, you set it up, ceasefires are inherently fragile, that much we know, we do know across the world. But I wonder how
Yun nga guys, ang viral ngayon ang pahayag ni President Trump, ceasefire. Kasi wala na ibang yan. Natutok sila sa sinabi ni President Trump. Ceasefire.
This is going to dominate the meeting because it quite literally is looming over it all. And so we're shadowing it. It's the most recent series of events. So that's just not take away the actual substance of the meeting that has long been on the agenda, and that's Ukraine. So the president of
Trump take credit for peace between Israel and Iran.
with the U.S. president as well.
Kita yan guys, diba?
Certainly became much more consequential, even though the U.S. president, Donald Trump, is only going to be on the ground is scheduled to be for just a little bit under 24 hours. It's certainly the Middle East is dominating just because it is still so raw and real, but as is Russia, Ukraine. But back to Article 5 for 1 second. I do think that is legitimate. This will also dominate this. I mean, there is one definition for Article 5. I'm not aware of other definitions for Article 5. The only time it has been used, of course, history will show is after the 9/11 terror attacks on the United States of America. That's why Article
35 million viewers, thank you for coming. Big love shoutout. Ayan, manood tayo na manood tayo ng TV host natin.
By every president that has served in the office. So this is something that we've heard President Trump say this before. He's venting frustration sometimes at the NATO spending things, but this is a central question. I think it's also send a shiver up the spine of some members of the alliance.
very briefly, because we're running out of time here, Jeff, do we know whether the president is expected to meet with President Zelensky?
We know that it's the anticipation that it is anticipated. It's not formally on the schedule. We know that President Zelensky was more likely to meet with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, but it's the anticipation that that is likely to happen, perhaps a meeting on the sidelines or something. If there would be no meeting, that would also
Si Zelensky na kita daw siya na plan to meet Zelensky at NATO sama. Yan yung President is Zelensky.
Indeed, definitely, really appreciate your analysis. Thank you very much.
Yan, makikita nyo yan. Makikita nyo man din yan.
Searching for survivors after strikes in Beersheba. Officials say several people were killed after Iranian missiles struck a residential building in the southern Israeli city. And this video looking at, geolocated by CNN, shows the aftermath of the attack. And CNN was on the ground in Israel just after the Iranian
33 million viewers. Thank you for coming. Mega love shout out.
In the final hour before the ceasefire between Israel and Iran went into effect, an Iranian ballistic missile slammed directly
Oh, makikita nyo nang nasira.
building. You can see the power of the impact of that missile that made a direct hit on this building. That column of concrete on the right side, just
Yung habang talumpati si Donald Trump, yan inatake ng Iran sa Israel.
had 3 people inside who were killed because of the fact that this was a direct impact. One other person was
Yung
killed
before mag-declare ng ceasefire, si
that of course speaks to the tragedy of this, the fact that 4 people were killed in Israel in the hours between when the ceasefire was announced by President Trump.
atake na yan sila guys sa atake ng Iran sa Israel.
Has taken hold between Israel and Iran.
Pagkatapos siya nag-declare si Trump ng ceasefire.
Expressions of anger from
Yeah.
President Trump directed at both
26
Israel
million
and
viewers.
Iran.
Thank you for coming. Mega love shout out.
Have violated this ceasefire agreement already, but there's no question that President Trump was directing the brunt of his anger at the Israeli government, and we're told that he actually spoke with the Israeli Prime Minister to tell him that he does not want to see any more Israeli airstrikes in Iran. There were nonetheless reports of explosions in Iran after President Trump said that he didn't want to see any more Israeli strikes. So some uncertainty around that, but there's no question that the days ahead will be very fragile and a real test of this ceasefire agreement. Jeremy Diamond, CNN, Beersheba, Israel.
For the latest from Tel Aviv on it is what Chief International Correspondent Melissa Ward. And Melissa, let me pick up with what Jeremy was saying there, and there's that sense of frustration from President Trump, calling out very clearly Israel, saying Israel has to calm down. How are those words being received by Prime Minister Netanyahu this hour?
Well, on an official level, I think there hasn't been a huge amount of response. I think that Israel clearly is keen to keep President Trump on side. Israeli officials are very grateful to President Trump. There is actually a huge poster outside.
24 million viewers. Thank you for coming. Mega love shout out.
President Trump. So the understanding from Israeli officials is that they need to rein it in. We've heard from the IDF chief of staff saying that now the focus, that they're moving into a new phase, which were his words, that people still need to remain vigilant, but that the focus now moves to Gaza, to returning the hostages, to toppling Hamas. I think it's interesting to note as well, Issa, that we heard from the hostage family forum, the family members of those hostages, 50 in Gaza, about 20 believed to still be alive, saying that they are pushing now and imploring Israel's leadership to include Gaza as part of this Israel-Iran ceasefire. Also very important to remind people, while this war has been going on between Israel and Iran and the world's attention has been consumed by that, that more than 860 people have died in Gaza, more than 70 just in the last 24 hours. So Israel's forces saying that that becomes their focus now.
Dami namatay,
But
guys.
certainly still a sense that the hostilities
600
between Israel and Iran,
people.
while they are formally now called off,
What is
so
it?
that is still fragile, although the Home Front
What
Command
is?
has said that they have now
Sure.
lifted the
Maybe.
emergency, state of emergency order, and people are
Because
free to
the
go back to work, go back to
President
school,
Donald
and
Trump.
get on with their lives, Lisa.
Larissa Wood for us this Tel Aviv. Thanks very much, Larissa.
Israel not listening to Donald Trump.
Tehran, there's been an uneasy
Donald Trump
calm
said,
amid the fragile ceasefire.
"Let's
So the
stop.
shops are open,
Don't,
but the fear remains
make
after
war."
a night of
He
intense bombing.
not
Israeli
listening.
forces claim one of their
He
targets
make
was
war.
a radar site in
Then
northern Iran.
Iran also
They must
make
in
boom.
smoke rising, as you can see there from the area. Our friend Michael has more of that now on
Why
Tehran.
your ear coming black?
after the
You
Israelis
put
made
something?
that claim that Iranian missiles were flying towards Israeli territory, I got in touch with senior Iranian officials who flat out denied that the Iranians fired any missiles toward Israel after the ceasefire went into effect. In fact, they said at the moment that time had come for the ceasefire that no missiles had been fired from the Iranian side. The Iranians are also now warning the Israelis against hitting Iranian territory, that that would open up Iranian retaliation once again, and that everything that we see what they call the occupied territory, meaning all of Israel would then become a target for Iran. Top language coming out of Tehran here as well. Also, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which of course is that elite wing of Iran's military, claiming that there were violations of its soil, as they put it, by the Israelis, possibly being encouraged by some sort of aircraft in the hours after the ceasefire went into effect. What we're seeing right now, actually, here in Tehran, is fairly calm.
It's alright.
A little bit earlier today, there's a lot of people who are out driving.
I eat later.
Soon as we made the deal, they came out and they dropped a load of bombs the likes of which I've never seen before.
But what the president said there about the Israelis unloading overnight after the ceasefire deal was announced was definitely something that we saw and we felt here from our vantage point as well. As up here on this roof, you all of a sudden heard the Israeli Air Force planes scream, what seemed to be Israeli Air Force planes, screaming past and then extremely loud explosions, rocking on and rocking also.
Non-stop, huh? Non-stop, huh?
Israel. Israel problem.
Israel problem?
That went on for the better part of, I would say, about half an hour, 45 minutes, maybe up to an hour, with those loud bangs continuing.
Yes.
Really, at some point, evacuation orders.
Ngayon pa lang, umpisa pa sila.
30 in the morning, but obviously people, most probably would have been asleep. So it certainly was a night that saw a lot of.
Ayan si guys, dito tayo guys kasi may kumakain na naman ako. Wala tayong narinig na kung atake na sila sa Qatar. Hala, 27 million viewers, mega love shout out. Ayan. Kasi kumakain sila guys, na makikita sila sa ating live. Pero narinig yung man ang news natin. Kasi ngayon wala pang news guys eh. Wala pa tayong balita sa pangyayari sa Qatar. Ang viral ngayon yung sinasabi ni Donald Trump, President Donald Trump na ceasefire. Pero parang hindi. Parang pahinga pa sila. Malay mo, di natin alam. Baka baka mag-atake naman sila. Magpahinga muna sila isang gabi. Pagod din sila. British ambassador to Iran from 2018. Makere. Yeah. 15 million viewers. Thank you for coming. Mega love shout out. Magandang gabi.
Do you think it can last? Yes, I think it can. I think that in the near term it might be last because.
Kasi dito tayo sa harap ka guys. Kumakain sila. Mayroon ako ba?
सही मतलब क्या है यार? चाय पूछता है क्या है?
मतलब नमक
Ceasefire.
Yeah,
32 million viewers. Thank you for coming. Mega love shout out.
मालूम है
मारता ही है.
इजराइल ऐसा उसको उंगली कर रहा है. अभी देखो ये सीज़फायर होने के बाद में
Iyaringay nila ang kumakain dalawa.
बहुत ऊपर तक जाएगा.
Yan.
और स्ट्रॉन्ग और मजबूत होएगा. उसका जितना नया सब
So, 75% tao na
वो सब टेस्ट कर दिया.
yung nag-alala sa buhay ng dalawang kampo.
वो जितना अभी सब टेस्ट किया है वो
Kasi damay na ibang bansa,
कर देगा वाला
pati sa
बोला
Qatar
आप
din
ये
na
सिस्टर
damay din.
अपने इजराइल का एकदम
Pero kasi ang ano nila tinitira na yung Airbase, US base.
हम लोग बोल रहा इजराइल के पास आई डोंट नो में बोल रहा
Kaya yung ingay nila eh.
आई डोंट आप पराजित कर दिया ईरान
25 million viewers, thank you for coming. Walang shout out.
आज बोलता है एक मिसाइल डाला है 6 मिसाइल डाला एक गिरा वो एक में इतना खतरनाक तबाही मचा
Yan ang
है
ingay-ingay nila guys eh. Wala tayong magawa, ingay itong dalawa.
आदमी मर गए
Nag-uusap din
4
sila
आदमी मर
about
गए
sa
स्पॉट में और जो 10-15
ceasefire.
आदमी है वो बलुए के अंदर
lahat ng tao nag-uusap about sa ceasefire sa payag ni President Trump. 18 million viewers, thank you for coming. Walang shout out.
Intrusive inspections into our nuclear program and to have really stable, controllable, and also
जो पूरा दुनिया में वही ऐसा एक कंट्री है जो डरता नहीं है
बोलता क्या आप साल लड़ा सद्दाम से
the relief for the Iranian people and hopefully a better dynamic inside the country.
You know Iran
अच्छा
better
है
than most of us.
एक मिडिल ईस्ट में पावरफुल ऐसा रहना चाहिए ऐसा रहेगा ना इजराइल भी मुस्लिम को देखने मारने से पहले ऐसे सोचेगा
17 million viewers, thank you for coming. Bigyan ng shout out.
जब फिलिस्तीन में हो रहा था ना
Ang ingay nilang dalawa, so kumakain sila.
When they say what they think the Iranian people,
मेरा भी जब 100 आदमी मर गया ना नॉर्मली
a lot of people
Naingay yung dalawa
वो टाइम पे
kumakain.
अगर हमला करता था ना इतना आदमी तो गाजा में नहीं मरता था
despite being given a bloody
है कि नहीं?
Kasi dito tayo sa kusina.
लेकिन वो कोशिश किया था कैसा
Kasi dito ang TV namin sa kusina.
यमन से तो उसी का ही है ना कोशिश किया था लेकिन
How, on that point, what do you think the calculus is of the regime? How do they-
Kunting minuto na lang tayo guys.
Of course.
Kasi tayo mag-update ngayon kung ano ang pangyayari ngayon. Kasi yung viral kasi, yung sinabi ni President Trump.
पूरा बनाना बोल रहे हैं
Ngayon ang balita nila ngayon.
मुझे समझ जाऊंगा
Hindi pa natin narinig kung continue yung atake nila sa Qatar. Kaya yun nanood tayo ng ano. 22 million viewers, thank you for coming. Ganun shout out.
किसी को नहीं चाहिए
prospect of success and something that I hope will work for both sides. But in the regime, there are the military was really stepped up in periods before. A lot of the top people were killed.
Ang ingay kasi itong dalawa to guys. 20 million viewers, thank you for coming. Ganun shout
Online
out.
regime is certainly absolutely determined to crush any sort of demonstrations or any popular risk of uprising. But the question, do they take themselves like, this is going to be got to go for a nuclear weapon because if we had it, it's going to happen to us? Or do they accept
Di pa natin narinig na kung continue sa Qatar.
their money, their power, and their lives? This is very real for the people at the top of the regime.
So it's interesting to see what happens next. What else we hear from the
Yung
Iranian side
ano daw nila kasi guys eh.
that said,
साला नहीं है बोल के मैं वो सुना बना
3 nuclear sa ano sa Iran.
Iran and the United States. This was in a call with the Saudi.
वो ना क्या साल नहीं है और तूने बना तो रोटी खा लिया समझ गया वो नहीं तो क्या करने का बोलो
Ambassador, thank you very much for coming in. Thank you very much indeed. And so to come up on the show for the world's largest alliance, united around a new defense spending cut.
Ayan, makita niyo.
Action at the NATO summit in the Netherlands. We'll take you there after the short break. You are watching CNN. And then later, after we're not going to break it, and then later, I think Israeli news about
Dito naman tayo guys. Tapos na kumain ang tama natin. Yeah.
Everything you want is here under the doesn't watch it, it's your house.
Ayan, dito naman tayo malapit. Lapitan naman natin.
CNN joined Saudi forces on an evacuation voyage.
It's very, very hard for me.
I'm worried about all the people who
Korea, Gaza is going to go to a rare checkpoint, and that slow things down. Every breath is a miracle. These babies born prematurely during the war in the Gaza Strip. The hospital staff are determined not to give up.
17 viewers, thank you for coming. Miguel of shout out.
Land is dug up and destroyed.
I fear for my life.
Qatar. Qatar, stop, huh?
No, this is nuts.
God, ladies win. Just Gen power and power for the people.
China is the world's largest car exporter, shipping out over 1.5 million cars in 2024, almost a 20% increase from the previous year. One automaker is on expanding its global
Ayan siya guys, kasi tapos ng balik-balik yung balita natin, dito na tayo. Kala ko kumakain yun. Hindi ko man pala kumain tayo ng taga-maniho na yun. Yan lang, doon tayo. Balik tayo dito sa ating sa ating puan.
part of the company's overall global strategy.
Ayan.
Inside Africa,
Kasi dito tayo guys sa kusina guys eh.
trailblazers involve culture, technology, and industry.
27 viewers, thank you for coming. Miguel up, shout out.
Dig into the landscapes and traditions inspiring a food revolution in southern Africa.
Na-stop ang Qatar guys, na-stop ang Qatar. Wala nang atake sa Qatar.
Inside Africa,
Marilyn, your Facebook money coming or no?
association with Zenith Bank.
No?
Welcome back, everyone. We are taking you back to that critical NATO meeting in the Netherlands. I want to show you, if we have them, some live pictures from The Hague, where any minute now members of the alliance are expected to assemble for a group photo. One of the high-stakes topics is whether the 32 members of the world's biggest security organization will unite around a new defense spending pledge. And that could have serious implications, of course, for Ukraine's wartime leader. We're hearing that Vladimir Zelensky will meet potentially with US President Donald Trump on the sidelines of the summit, and that's coming from a US official. Mr. Zelensky's search for
Ayan, 27 viewers, thank you for coming. Ayan, makikita nyo yan o.
Right across Ukraine. CNN senior White House correspondent Kristen Holmes joins me now from the Netherlands, and as I'm seeing here, President Trump on speaking to reporters on Air Force One said, now we're going to NATO and we'll get a new set of problems. What are, in his eyes, the problems here?
When we talk about NATO, one of the things that he often says is that he doesn't understand why the United States is paying so much, particularly when it comes to defense, because in his mind, and this is what he said publicly, of why is the United States paying for the defense of countries that are
Yan mga
across the
leaders
ocean?
sa
Which is part why you're seeing
Gather in
this
Netherlands
goal
for NATO
around
summit,
what you
guys.
said, signing this new way to raise defense spending that would include about
26
5%
viewers, thank you for
GDP
coming.
from
Miguel up,
these members.
shout
That's
out.
something that President Trump has been pushing for, although recently he said that he thinks the United States should have to pay that. And the United States obviously has been a member of NATO for long before President Trump came along, but he has had this kind of intense and tense at times relationship with NATO, threatening to pull out of NATO, saying that he didn't really understand the meaning of NATO. So then you're seeing him come here with this backdrop, particularly interesting given what we've seen in the past 24 hours, the backdrop of the ceasefire in the Middle East. And part of what we're told is that this is going to serve as somewhat of a victory lap for President Trump as he celebrates his success. And he, of course, is taking credit, as we have seen, for this ceasefire, shaky as it is, that's happening currently in the Middle East. And part of the reason that he wanted this to work out as he was on his way here was so he could take that, because he has long said that he believes he is a peacemaker, and he thinks this is his opportunity, according to people around him, to show that his way also works.
forward for other world leaders, because he's constantly saying that he wants to put the benefits of the U.S. first, not understanding the benefits that these alliances may bring. So it'll be interesting to see how all of these leaders interact with President Trump. One of the things we know a lot of them have been concerned about is getting into any kind of public back and forth or public tit for tat, because President Trump, of course, is known to get publicly aggressive with world leaders on any stage. So everyone is trying to kind of tiptoe around to see how the dynamics play out for this trip.
Yeah, peacemaker, but of course he did promise to end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours, and here we are. Let me just flesh out what you said in terms of Article 5, and we played it earlier. The President was asked on board the airplane Air Force One today, are you still committed to Article 5 of NATO? His question, his answer was, depends on your definition. I'm committed to being their friends, I'm committed to saving lives, I'm committed to safety. It says, of course, Article 5 requires members to defend each other from attack. That, Kristen, and you will hear this no doubt in the Netherlands, will make many European leaders very worried indeed, because that 5% depends on whether the United States is fully on board with it.
Yeah, and we've heard from President Trump that he has indicated he's not fully on board. That is not something that he fully backs the way that we've seen other presidents historically back. And that's what's going to be interesting to see the dynamics here at play when the president actually starts talking to these leaders and when this issue comes up. Because for months, and even during his first term, he has bashed the very concept of the NATO alliance. The idea that we should be defending other countries, that we should be giving United States funding to these other countries. Again, that's obviously he takes the concept or the meaning out of the word alliance, as that is what you do in an alliance, is support each other. But President Trump has long said that he believes only, or majorly, a majority in the America First idea. And so it will come up, and it will be a topic of conversation. But I will say, one of the things that we've learned from the G7, and we've learned from these various world leaders, is that they tend to tiptoe around President Trump, particularly when the cameras are rolling, when there are these
10 million viewers, thank you for coming. Mega love shout out.
And we know that President Trump has had no problem, as we've seen multiple times, embarrassing public leaders, or embarrassing leaders on a public stage. And so how they get to this and how they confront President Trump is really going to be one of the dynamics that we're watching closely, because it has been difficult for, and it's not just these leaders, it's for leaders around the globe to figure out their approach to handling this president.
Kristen, really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Just before you go, I want to show the live pictures again from The Hague, where any minute now, do we have them? Members of the alliance are expected to assemble a red carpet design.
Ayan, makita nyo yan guys. So, balita natin.
We'll of course bring that to you. In the meantime, still to come right on the show, world leaders are gathering for the NATO summit as the ceasefire deal between Iran and Israel continues to play out. And then a desperate situation for people facing starvation in Gaza. Health officials say yet again Palestinians attempting to access food have come under Israeli fire. We'll bring you both those stories after this.
We are in Turkey.
This is our journey.
To see the ancient cities of legends up close.
It's incredible. Ruins whisper the stories of the eras.
Civilizations that marked history walk these roads. This is where the
ayan,
story
maganda
of
yung
humanity
view.
grows.
We have so
Sa
many
Turkey yan
stories to
guys,
tell.
so views ng Turkey.
On
Turkey
Laura
yan.
Goes Live, we cover it all, from legal battles. At least one juror has now been excused from political showdowns.
How much do you think that weighs on the president?
And the conversations in between.
Wayne from Washington. Wayne, what's your question? Would you take this all the way?
27 viewers, thank you for coming. Mega love shout out. Tayo ay
What do you say?
papatapos na ating minuto guys.
All the news, all on Laura Codes Live, Tuesday through Saturday on CNN.
Yung balita na yun natapos na. Bukas naman tayo makinig ng balitang TV host natin. Para tayo ay antambayanan natin ang mga balita sa ating paligid. 21 viewers, thank you for coming. Miguel Love, shout out. Ayan, ang ganda yung mga views nila guys.
I don't think we
Titibuhos
need to trade
natin.
off the idea of a private market versus a public market. And I think sometimes it's about keeping a focus on what really matters and having a long-term view. If I think about the strategy of the stock exchange, I describe us as a convener. Our job is to bring together those who have capital with those who need capital in service of an objective. If you look at the investment grades in the UK, they have been below our peers. You know, in a sense, we've been looking at it as cash in, cash out, and not differentiating between current spending and the long-term infrastructure spending that any nation needs to create the right ecosystem to thrive. Whether that is actually that we've got enormous green energy assets in the UK, you need the infrastructure and investment to actually bring that on shore so that you can finance the data centers that mean that the AI capability that we have in the UK, which is remarkable, actually can flourish.
Ayan, maganda yung views niya guys. Oh. Ayan. 23 million viewers, thank you for coming. Miguel Love, shout out.
Welcome back, everyone. Right now, as you can see there, critical NATO summit is underway in The Hague, the Netherlands. It's 8:36 in the evening, as you can see there, where world leaders are gathering to discuss important issues, including the conflicts in the Middle East and the Ukraine. And why we're showing you this? Because they are supposed to gather for a group photo. The carpet is laid out already, waiting. Some cars are beginning to arrive. And this hour we are learning that US President Donald Trump is expected to meet Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. That is according to US official. This is, of course, the president's vehicle. The last hour, we saw the president arriving after predicting what he called a calmer situation at the summit, following what has been fragile ceasefire talks, of the ceasefire between Iran and Israel. Let's just wait. There is the president. I'm just going to pause here just to listen in for a second. And there is the President of the United States.
29 viewers, million viewers, thank you for coming. Miguel Love, shout out.
NATO summit. Let's hear the questions. Everyone very polite.
Ayan, kita nyo yun, umakyat na yun sa taas. Nasa Netherlands siya.
And President Donald Trump, before leaving, of course, to the Netherlands, speaking outside the White House lawn, really flashed some intense anger regarding the ceasefire that he brokered between Israel and Iran, which was growing very fragile in these early hours. And he had some very harsh words, not just for Iran, but also for the United States ally, Israel. And now, on Air Force One, he said he had other problems now at NATO, and that one of those concerns, of course, is regarding defense spending and bringing the defense spending to 5%. No doubt that Iran, conversations over Iran, over
30
Israel,
million viewers, thank you for
in terms of
coming.
diplomacy will be on the
Miguel Love,
table,
shout
of course,
out. Ayan.
part of the discussions, given, of course,
Nasa Netherlands si,
Europeans were also part of some of these negotiations,
President
some of these
Trump
discussions
sa
prior
Dahig.
to the United States striking some of
Dahig,
Iran's
Netherlands.
facilities, but also very critical to many of NATO allies will be, of course, Ukraine and the war in Ukraine and the pressure campaign that will need to be put on President Putin. And for that, defense spending, which has been critical, something that the president has been calling for 5% of GDP. Not many countries on board. One of them was Spain, not wanting to go down to 5%. Today, it's the Greek vote we're expecting, and then the summit really gets underway with a president tomorrow. I want to leave those images for now. I want to continue focusing, of course, on the fragile Israel-Iran ceasefire that the president is taking credit for. Here to discuss this is Israeli writer and journalist Yossi Madan. He's also co-author of Spies Against Armageddon. And Yossi, apologies if I have to interrupt. We're looking here at live images of the President behaved, members of the royal family, I believe. We don't have sound. Correct me if I'm wrong, though. We have sound, no sound. So apologies if I have to interrupt, Yossi. We have these live images from The Hague. But let me get a sense of what we heard from the President. I was mentioning just a few moments ago, this is a fragile and shaky ceasefire. We don't have the fine print on it. And we heard earlier today, before leaving, of course, to The Hague, a really frustrated and visibly angry president with Israel and Iran. And it had some very strong words. How much do you think those words would have been received by the Netanyahu camp? And how significant do you think those comments are?
Well, it was very significant indeed, Isa. I think I've never seen U.S. president so angry about an Israeli actions, not even during the Obama days, which the relations then were very tense, or even Biden during the war in Gaza. So yes, I think the anger settled with Netanyahu. He realized that he cannot push his luck too much, and that's why he succumbed to the harsh words of Trump and forcing the Israeli airplanes, which were on their way to bomb Iran, to return back to their bases, aside from one symbolic attack to try dropping some bombs on the radar site in Iraq.
I wonder then, Yossi, how you think that changes the calculus for Prime Minister Netanyahu. We're seeing from that Israel says it will respect the ceasefire with Iran as long as the other side does. This is according to Israel Katz, who is Israel's defense minister. This is something he told, we understand, the US Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth. But we know also, Yossi, that President Trump clearly motivated for the ceasefire and doesn't want this to escalate, and clearly wants to take the credit here. But does Prime Minister Netanyahu feel the same way? And do you think that the President Trump, will have to restrain him in some way here?
Yes, I think absolutely. I mean, it's a historical moment for Israel. I think it's the most successful, important achievement in the history of Israel. The first one, the establishment of the state of Israel during a war with 7 Arab nations in 48, 49, then the 6 Days War of 1967, and now Israel, with the help of the United States.
43 million viewers, thank you for coming, Miguel of shout out.
Israel removed the Iranian nuclear threat and pushed it back for many, many years. And that was the lifetime truth for Netanyahu. He was talking about it time and again. He tried 2-3 times to launch an attack against Iran, but the last moment he backed and didn't execute. So I think it's very important, and now the focus is on Gaza and whether President Trump would be able also to deliver his vision, his request, his hope that there will be a ceasefire in Gaza and the release of the hostages and maybe rebuilding of Gaza. Of course, 21 months.
And I'll get to Gaza, Yossi, in just a moment. You called it a successful achievement, and I wonder, from your perspective, who you think is in the driver's seat in this conflict? We've seen President Trump, as you quite rightly pointed out, ordering Israeli planes to turn around. Trump, in the meantime, President Trump taking credit for the ceasefire, but it's been the Israelis, of course, that were on the front foot here. Or who is leading it here? Who do you think has been leading this attack, this successful achievement?
Well, first of all, Netanyahu, who had the guts to take such a determined decision to order the Israeli Air Force, the Israeli Army, and the Mossad intelligence agency to go into action. Certainly, without the superb performance of the Mossad and the military intelligence and about the Israeli Air Force, this success couldn't be achieved. So, Netanyahu gave the order, he decided to order and command the military, but after all, most of it goes to the military, to the intelligence services that have such a precise intelligence from so many sides. And also, the Israeli air shows a lot of resilience. I mean, we suffered major blows in the last 12 days. 30,000 houses were damaged or destroyed. People were killed, more than 1,000 injured. So altogether, the rear, the home front, and the military deserve the credit with the leadership of Netanyahu. And now probably it will show on his rating in the public opinion.
Yossi, really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us, and thank you for your perspective. Thank you, Yossi.
Thank you.
Now, Israel's military says although a significant case is over, this campaign with Iran is not. But the IDF says for now, it's turning its attention back to Gaza, as you heard Yossi there. We warn you, the next video you're about to see is disturbing. Gaza health officials say yet again today that dozens of Palestinians seeking food were killed by Israeli fire. They say at least 86 people in all were killed across Gaza since midnight. Al-Shifa Hospital calls the situation catastrophic, since many patients were rushed to intensive care surgery. One young Palestinian who was injured says those who don't die in the strikes will die.
I was going to bring food to my family, to my siblings and my brother. We got injured. There was a lot of fire. It is difficult. It is food with the taste of blood.
I'm going to leave that there for just a second. Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel speaking. Let's listen in.
A friend like President Trump, and I thank him for our cooperation. This is going to reflect for each one of your security and your grandchildren and the Middle East. Citizen of Israel, the 7th of October, we have had the biggest disaster together with the government and security forces and you, the people. We managed to recover and fight back. 20 months later, we are controlling the skies of Iran and we exact a price, unprecedented price. Even that we have a tremendous achievement, we are not going to be complacent. We're going to be the other way around. We have no intention to remove our foot from the gas. We're going to defeat Hamas and bring back the hostages and the hostages families. I'm saying, it didn't stop even for a second during the war to bring our hostages back the live and the missing. And we are telling you, to the bereaved families, your loved one didn't fall in vain. Their heroic way managed us to break the axis of the Iranian. Without this, we couldn't destroy Tehran, and after eliminating the axis of evil, it's going to be prosperity in this region. We're working hard. We'll compensate everyone that got hurt and will bring the economy to new heights. Citizens of Israel and all. We are embracing the fallen families and we wish well to all the injured in all the campaign since the 7th of October. Recently, I visited a few cities that had many damage by Iran. As I promised the citizens we will rebuild it. The citizen of Israel, I would like to thank on your behalf to Eyal Zamir, Chief General, commanders, the head of Mossad Barnea,
Netanyahu guys,
and the Mossad warriors,
nasa Binhamin
the
Netanyahu.
head of the IAF, Tomer Bar, and our brave pilots that did such a tremendous job, and the ground groups and Binder and the intelligence groups. They managed to uncover the secrets of the enemy. My Secretary Roman Gottman, the Israeli police, medical teams that saved many, many lives. And I would like to thank the Defense Minister, Israel Katz, and all the other ministers that stood behind this historic decision, and everyone worked hard in their department, and they saw the importance of the moment. Thank you for everything.
Some Israel ministers.
I'd like to, most of all, thank you, citizens of Israel. This is the time of unity. Each citizen of Israel can say, together we did the unbelievable. The people has risen, Am Yisrael high, the people are alive, and we guarantee the integrity of Israel.
We've been listening there to Prime Minister Netanyahu. I believe this was a taped address, but correctly, I'm not sure if you should correct me if I'm wrong on my ear, but let me just tell you what he said. Thanking the United States cooperation, saying we control the skies over Iran. He said Israel had tremendous achievements, but we're not complacent. No intention of removing our foot, he said, from the gas. We'll remove Hamas and return the hostages, the living, of course. Around 20, as we have thought, to be alive. He also said, and I'm quoting him here, we have thwarted Iran's nuclear project. If anyone tries to restore it, we'll act with the same determination and the same force to foil such an attempt. I'll repeat and say, Iran will not have a nuclear weapon. So Prime Minister Netanyahu there hailing a historic victory for Iran's. And we have some breaking news now coming into CNN on how successful the US attack in Iran actually was. I want to go straight to Zachary Cohen in Washington, D.C. Zachary, what can you tell us here?
We've just learned that the early U.S. intelligence assessment about that military strike against Iranian nuclear facilities, we are learning that it was not a complete obliteration of those facilities as the way Donald Trump, the president here in the United States, and some of his top officials have been claiming. Specifically, the assessment, as far as our sources describe it, say that there was limited damage inflicted on core components of Iran's nuclear program as a result of those strikes. That includes things like limited damage to the centrifuges and to the stockpile of already enriched uranium. Now, those are two key pieces of Iran's nuclear capability, and we are now learning for the first time through this assessment that we're told was produced by the Defense Intelligence Agency that the initial read on the situation is that those strikes did not successfully take out those facilities and the capability that comes with it. Now, I do want to note that this is a very initial and early assessment and one that could change with further scrutiny over what is really the key question in the wake of those military strikes: how much damage was done. The U.S. military has made it clear since the strikes took place that the tactical operation itself was a success, but has also reiterated that more time is needed to assess the damage component of it. The initial assessment around that is that the damage was relatively limited. It was mostly confined to the outside portions of those facilities, and again, the core structures, the core components of the nuclear program itself appear to be relatively intact.
And you're coming on with this breaking news for our viewers, of course. And we just heard from Netanyahu, we have thwarted Iran's nuclear project, right? This is what he said. The president had said, when was it, a day or so ago, saying that they've been obliterated, completely and totally obliterated. What can you tell us how the White House is responding to this early U.S. intelligence assessment according to your sources here?
Absolutely. We reached out to the White House for comment on this reporting before we broke it on your air just now, and we did get a statement back from the White House press secretary here on Lebanon, who said, I'm going to read this in full. This alleged assessment is flat out wrong and was classified as top secret, but was still leaked to CNN by an anonymous, low-level loser in the intelligence community. The leaking of this alleged assessment is a clear attempt to demean President Trump and discredit the brave fighter pilots who conducted a perfectly executed mission to obliterate Iran's nuclear program. Everyone knows what happens when you drop 14 30,000-pound bombs perfectly on their targets, total obliteration. And now, also Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth bringing a statement to CNN, essentially pushing back on not the reporting itself, but on supporting President Donald Trump's view that this did result in complete obliteration. The early returns, though, from the intelligence community, based on our reporting, is that it's not lying.
Exclusive reporting there from Zachary Cohen, who I have no doubt will have much more in the next hour with Max Foster. What we know is next. Thank you, Zach.
If you can keep your head when markets all around you are losing and you can't see a way through, if you can trade and not make money your master, meeting triumph.
So yun sa guys, tapos na yung balita natin. 39 million viewers. Thank you for coming. Mega love shout out.
We will make sense of it all. And what is more, my friend, you will be profitable. For you are indeed. But you question means business.
In the hub, way east, east west, CNN Arabic, perfectly placed to find the facts. This is where stories happen. Politics, business, culture, real life. As the pace of change moves faster, we ask the important question. What is the truth? This is CNNArabic.com.
Discover the land of the rising sun, from the vibrant streets of Tokyo to the enchanting landscapes. Come explore Japan with CNN. And experience the best of this rich nation. A desire to create timeless beauty everywhere.
Appreciate the opportunity to sit down with you.
An epic adventure to Japan's remote corners.
Ang ganda yung mga views.
On Laura Coach Live, we cover it all, from legal battles. At least one juror has now been excused from political showdowns.
How much do you think that weighs on the president?
And the conversations in between.
Wayne from Washington. Wayne, what's your question? Will you take this all the way to Supreme Court?
I'm not refuting a syllable of what you said.
What do you say to people who are looking to find their voice? All the news, all on Laura Comes Live, Tuesday through Saturday on CNN.
The people here are being largely ignored by the world. We've now witnessed for ourselves that children are working here, that they are involved in production column. It's very, very close. They want us to start moving. You are police, you're not of God. These children are accusing you of abusing them. You have nothing to say for yourself. Every day they tell her to go back. And every day she has to do this extraordinarily long route to try and get in. This is the human cost of fighting across the border. I've been informed by sources of threats against me. That's what happens here. When you look too closely at Russia's business dealings,
There's a sense of the degree in Israeli bombardment.
oh, I see that. Journalists.
I'm Rafael Romo in Atlanta. This is CNN.
Dito ko. Para matutong.
This is CNN Breaking News. New reporting on how successful the US attack in Iran actually was. Let's get straight to Zach Cohen. He's in Washington. Zach.
Yeah, Matt, this is the first look at what is really called an early initial U.S. intelligence assessment about how effective those U.S. military strikes were on Iranian nuclear facilities. And we're told that as of now, this early read is that core components of Iran's nuclear program and its capabilities remain intact, and we're not of that strike. This, again, is an initial assessment that could change with more scrutiny. It's one that the military has made clear that the mission, the operation ordered by President Trump against those facilities was a tactical success, but insisting that more time was needed to assess the amount of damage. Now, Donald Trump himself has really come out strongly and quickly in the wake of the attack and claimed that the strikes really resulted in the obliteration of Iran's nuclear capabilities. But again, this initial assessment from the Defense Intelligence Agency, our sources describe it as saying that the centrifuges and the enriched uranium at these sites was not destroyed. And in particular, that the centrifuges themselves that are used to enrich uranium remain, quote, intact. So again, this is a little bit different of a viewpoint and assessment of the impact of these strikes than the one Donald Trump and possibly have been pushing in the last several days. I want to read a statement from White House Secretary Caroline Levitt. We reached out to her prior to breaking this news, and I want to read it in full. She said, quote, "The alleged assessment is flat out wrong. It's classified as top secret. We're still waiting to see an end by an anonymous low-level loser in the intelligence community. The leaking of this alleged assessment is a clear attempt to demean President Trump and discredit the brave fighter pilots who conducted a perfectly executed mission to obliterate Iran's nuclear program. Everyone knows what happens when you drop 14 30,000-pound bombs perfectly on the targets. Total obliteration." Now, the press secretary there speaking very definitively, but notably not contradicting the reporting that this is what the initial intelligence assessment does say. And in fact, this has been an open question really outside of the White House. Even the top general here in the United States, the chairman of the campaign, made clear today that more time was needed for speaking to say what was and was not still there after the strike. Again, we're now getting the first formal conclusion by a member of the U.S. intelligence.
Yeah, so it's a large community. Is there an implication there from the White House that this is an action line? How reliable are these sources? Do they speak for the whole intelligence community? And as you said, it's just an early assessment, but how reliable can we see this information at?
Yeah, the Defense Intelligence Agency, which is the agency that produced this assessment that was described by our sources, so looking to extremely effective intelligence and more briefed on it, isn't an agency of the U.S. intelligence community. It doesn't speak for the entire community. It does conduct a lot of analytical, it goes through the analytical process of reviewing the intelligence that has come in since those strikes, things like satellite imagery, things like various forms of intelligence streams, reach and early conclusions. And this is an agency that deals with this on a professional basis. And the sourcing, and our sources executed that, and the description, the detail in which they were describing the assessment, does create an accurate picture of what this early assessment said. Again, with more scrutiny, this assessment could obviously change and could or evolve. But at this point, this early stage, after the strikes themselves, this is the read of at least one key intelligence agency here in the United States.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Zach, thank you so much. Let's speak to Jeff Zeleny about the political implications of this. Of course, President Trump saying the sites were obliterated. This suggests that might not be true. That's going to be a damning assessment.
Look, there's no question that this has been one of the points of contention for the president. Really, ever since the strikes, the president has been defensive about the outcome. He talked about obliteration on Saturday evening here in the U.S. when he addressed the nation and indeed the world. He repeated it the next day. And again, it was getting under his skin just yesterday when the reports were just questioning the idea of it is still unknown. The battle damage assessment is still unknown. Well, now these early reports as Zach was just talking about there, are indicating that obliteration may not be the word at all. That certainly has drawn the ire of the White House. As you heard from our press secretary, but of course, as you're seeing on the right of the screen there, the president is at the NATO summit, and this also is hanging over all of this. So they're taking the family photograph that was known there with the leaders and family and faith. And this is something that is certainly going to aggravate the president. But again, there's been a swiftness to the action here, an extraordinary 48 hours of the history books that may well look back on from those strikes early Sunday morning in Iran, and then the ceasefire announced by the U.S. president just 48 hours later. It is still holding, but it's fragile. There's no doubt about it. And this is the underpinning of all of that. So the question of the Iran nuclear program and whether it could be back up and running again, if it's true, if this early assessment holds and it could actually be up and running again in a number of months, that would be very politically dangerous indeed. But the White House and the president earlier today, as they left Washington, were trying to dismiss any criticism of this as an attack on the American pilots that responded to the mission. That, of course, misses the point. It's not a question of the pilot's mission. That was clearly carried out safely and swiftly, but the attack on the obliteration is what the president has used. So, again, early assessment, we will see what later is. There's several other things happening. The administration is not keen to talk more about this, and that is the postponing or the canceling of a classified briefing that was scheduled to happen this afternoon on Capitol Hill, and that is not happening now. It's unclear why. So certainly an early assessment, but a pointed and important one.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for your look at that. Fragile ceasefire then between Israel and Iran holds for now. A written statement that Iran is ready to resolve issues with the United States. That statement came in a call between the last president and Saudi Prince Mohammed bin Salman. President said he would welcome any assistance, and that Iran achieved an historic victory, what he called a 12-day war, after a night of intense bombings. Israeli forces claimed one of their targets was a radar site in northern Iran. Has more on Iran's denial that it violated the ceasefire.
After the Israelis made that Iranian missiles were flying Israeli territory, I got in touch with senior Iranian officials who flat out denied that the Iranians fired any missiles before Israel after the ceasefire. In fact, they said at the moment that time had come for the ceasefire, that no missiles had been fired from the Iranian side. The Iranians are also now warning the Israelis against hitting Iranian territory, saying that would open up Iranian retaliation once again, and that everything that was in what they call the occupied territories, were meaning that all of Israel would then become a target for Iran. So some tough language coming out of Tehran here as well. Also, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which of course is that elite wing of Iran, claiming that there were several violations of its soil, as they put it, by the Israelis, possibly being secured by some sort of aircraft in the hours after the ceasefire went into effect. What we're seeing right now, actually, here in Tehran, is that things are fairly calm here. I was on the streets a little bit earlier today. There's a lot of people who are driving some shops opening up.
As soon as we made the deal, they came out and they dropped a load of bombs, the likes of which I've never seen before.
Hello, shout out 26 million viewers. Mega love shout out. So malapit na tayo matapos, guys. Tayo pahinga. Yan, nakita yun naman ang yan.
Israeli Air Force planes streaking, what seemed to be Israeli Air Force planes streaking past at an extremely loud explosion, rocking our building and then rocking also a lot of other places in central Tehran as well. We saw a lot of outgoing anti-aircraft gunfire coming from the Iranians. The skies here over the city really were illuminated. That went on for the better part of, I would say, about half an hour, 45 minutes, maybe up to an hour, where those loud bangs continued. The Israelis at some point issued evacuation orders for certain districts here in Tehran as of 2:30 in the morning.
Qatar stop, huh?
Those districts most probably would have been asleep. So it certainly was a night
I
that
don't
saw
know this one,
activity.
Israel.
And as of right now, the Iranians are saying that their forces are not firing back. The foreign minister of this country, Abbas Araghchi, came out and said
that Iranian forces had fired until the moment that the ceasefire went into effect, which the Iranians considered to be 4 a.m. In the morning, and that since then, no projectiles, they say, have been fired from Iran towards Israeli territory.
Well, as Donald Trump continues to declare the US strikes, the airstrikes on Iran a success, most Americans disapprove. That's according to a new CNN poll, which finds 56% disapprove of the airstrikes. It also found that about 6 in 10 Americans don't trust Mr. Trump's decision-making on the use of force in Iran. David Chalian is CNN's bureau chief in Washington. I mean, he's not going to like this, is he? But it is quite telling.
It is quite telling, and I think it sort of gets behind why he was so amped up this morning before getting on the plane. He is so eager to have this ceasefire take hold, wrap this up with a bow, and put it to the side. We know that the facts on the ground may not allow for that, but I think he's aware that it's a wary American public watching this unfold. So you did the top line results there about the 56% disapproving his action. You could look at that bipartisanship as well, Max, because as you might suspect, Republicans overwhelmingly support the action. Democrats opposed it. You see them, but look at that middle line. Independents, the so politically important middle of the road voters, 60% oppose, only 40% are in favor. And the other thing that we asked is, do you think that these strikes in Iran actually make Iran more of a threat or less of a threat to the United States? And nearly 6 in 10 Americans, 58% say after the strikes, they believe Iran is more of a threat to the United States. That actually includes a chunk of Republicans who were in favor of the strikes. So there are real questions that the American people are asking, or at least watching carefully here before they come up with a final judgment here. And of course, how things unfold will determine that. But in the immediate aftermath of the strikes, this is an unpopular action by President Trump.
Yeah, I'm wondering, David, what you think, how personal this is. Is it, a question of Donald Trump's decision-making, or just, people in America have got their own problems right now. They don't want to get involved in a protracted war. They're thinking back to Iran and Afghanistan, and they just don't like the idea of dealing with other people's problems when there are so many at home.
That is precisely the argument we've heard from many inside the Republicans' base, his base of support in the MAGA movement. Marjorie Taylor Greene, the congresswoman from Georgia, a stalwart supporter of President Trump's. And you were just giving voice in your question, Max, to the exact argument she's been making, that there has been a series of endless wars. Donald Trump promised to turn the country away from that kind of involvement, and there's concern that this could grow to that. Now, obviously, we don't know. Perhaps this will not grow into something like an expanded, wider conflict here, and Donald Trump can call it a success. We're just not at the place that we know that. And in the interim, he knows that the public is watching carefully for precisely the reason you say, which is not only are they concerned about this particular moment, but there have been decades of history here that suggest that this could potentially be a slippery slope.
Absolutely. David, thank you so much. A fascinating study. Israel's Prime Minister has just addressed the nation, declaring what he called an historic victory in this conflict. But as Israel continues its war in Gaza, Benjamin Netanyahu said he wouldn't get complacent.
Even that we have tremendous achievements, we are not going to be complacent. We're going to be the other way around. We have no intention to remove our foot from the gas.
Clarissa Ward joining us from Tel Aviv, very much aimed at the domestic audience there, unlike other speeches, Clarissa.
Definitely, this was a sort of mission accomplished speech for the Israeli public. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying that Israel's strikes against Iran had thwarted its nuclear and missile capabilities, but also warning that they would act again with the same force if they see Iran try to reconstitute their nuclear program or their missile programs. I mean, what's interesting here, he obviously went on to thank President Trump as well, and to say that this was a historic cooperation and that this is the best friend to Israel that has ever been in the White House. And also, we've heard basically from the IDF now, Max, saying that the focus really becomes Gaza again now, that that they need to focus on toppling Hamas, on returning the hostages. Though I do think it's interesting, 50 hostages still inside Gaza, 20 of them believed to still be alive. Today we saw the family members from the Family Hostage Forum members coming out and saying effectively, we want Gaza to be part of this ceasefire as well. So some people hoping that potentially now, with the focus no longer on Iran, that potentially some kind of space can be created to try to come up with some kind of a ceasefire agreement inside Gaza. And obviously, as we have been talking about, Max, the world has been very consumed, understandably, with this conflict between Israel and Iran. But during this 12-day period, more than 860 people have been killed inside Gaza, more than 70 in the last 24 hours alone. The UN still warning of a man-made famine as a result of the dire humanitarian situation inside. So certainly a lot of people will be hoping that potentially out of this space created with this fragile ceasefire holding here, that might be a new direction. And one other thing I just would add, Max, is that the Home Front Command here in Israel has lifted the state of emergency. Airport is opening, schools are opening, and some sense of normalcy returning now, Max.
One of his main missions was apparently to destroy the nuclear sites, Clarissa, but we've now got this reporting, haven't we, from CNN, saying early US intel suggests the strikes on Iran didn't destroy the nuclear sites. Does that change Benjamin Netanyahu's ideas here? Because it wouldn't be mission accomplished if he hadn't achieved the goal.
Well, it's interesting. First of all, I should just say Israel has never fully stated what its strategic objective was or what the mission accomplished metric was. Was it the complete decimation of the nuclear program? Was it regime change, as so many people had been speculating? I noticed when we saw Prime Minister Netanyahu give that mission accomplished speech, so to speak, he didn't really, the word he used was thwarted. We have thwarted Iran. That's kind of a vague word, and it's definitely different from what we've heard President Trump talk about total obliteration. Yesterday, we heard the IDF talking about it being set back years, but I think what's really emerging, honestly, is that we are only just starting to get pieces of the fuller picture as to the extent of the damage. But Israel, for now, seems intent upon upholding the ceasefire, spinning this internally as a massive success for Israel and for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Max?
Okay, Clarissa, in Tel Aviv, thank you so much. Now, it wasn't exactly a love letter, but it was pretty close. We'll tell you about the message that NATO's chief sent to Donald Trump today and what it means for the future of that alliance.
Today we live in an unpredictable environment and news races.
Ayan nga siya guys, mega love shoutout sa lahat. 20 million viewers, thank you for coming, mega love shoutout. So natapos na yung balita natin guys.
My show brings you the latest news and top news makers.
Tayo ay makinig naman bukas. Tayo ay magla-live ulit bukas para alam natin ang kung anong balita sa ating paligid. So 21 million viewers, thank you for coming, mega love shoutout. So mapapatapos na tayo guys. 5 minutes na lang tayo ay matapos.
Exported to markets around the world.
Ayan.
Energy is amazing. Feels so good to be here.
Kasi natapos na yung news natin na napanood natin ng news na kung anong mangyayari sa ating paligid.
My name is Grace Forrest and I'm the founding director of Walk Free. I actually was first inspired to get involved in this fight when I was 15 years old, and I had the opportunity to work with children, some as young as 3 years old, who have been rescued from child sex trafficking. I went back and actually lived in Nepal some years later and worked for a survivor leader, Anurag Kerala, who won a CNN.
Ayan guys, yung tawag nito is charity. Hindi na lang sa Pilipinas yung mahilig mag-charity, dito rin sa ibang bansa guys, magbibigay sila ng charity.
Another person will go in. Modern slavery is sadly one of the most profitable organized crimes in the world.
Yan, lahat ng yan mga charity. Kung makikita nyo yan sa literato, charity yan.
In all its forms in our lifetime. It's an incredible honor to receive the Freedom from Fear Award, an organization, the Roosevelt Foundation.
24 million viewers, thank you for coming. Mega love shout out.
Freedom from fear itself is usually around categorizing the protection of civilians in
4 minutes na lang tayo guys, matatapos tayo.
To the area of modern slavery, where frankly, their freedom from fear is most categorized as not having their freedom to choose.
Superman. Recently, you've come under a lot of fire for what some like. It's a lot.
I stopped the war.
You seemingly acting as a representative of the United States with war for me.
Doing good.
I would question myself in the same situation that
People are going to die. Hey, buddy. Eyes up here.
Breaking news this hour. Sources telling CNN that according to an early US intelligence assessment, the US military strikes on 3 of Iran's nuclear facilities last weekend didn't destroy
Only set Iran nuclear program by
only set
month.
it back just a few months. It comes as Donald Trump has arrived at the NATO summit in the Netherlands. He appears to be on a victory lap, claiming great success in the attacks on Iran, which he says both destroyed Iran's nuclear capabilities and brought an end to the fighting between Israel and Iran. For some perspective on what to expect at the summit, we're joined by Kurt Volker. He's a former US ambassador to NATO. I don't know, Kurt, if you had a chance to sort of get a sense of our reporting this hour, but there is a suggestion from intelligence sources that the US attacks weren't as destructive as the president has implied. Obviously, early days on the intelligence, but what do you make of that?
Source early US intel said just strike.
And I think it will take some time before we get intelligence.
Only set back Iran nuclear program by month.
Tell us exactly what happened. We don't know the extent of the destruction of the underground facilities. We don't know what happened to the enriched uranium. Was it there? Was it moved in advance? Was some of it moved? Was it dispersed? And we don't know the extent of other equipment that Iran may still have that would allow it to reconstitute the program. So that's all things we're going to be watching. But I don't think there can be any doubt that this set back the Iranian program by some significant degree.
On the basis that the intelligence might not all be there yet, equally, that's the case for the president as well. He's said very clearly that it was obliterated, but he can't say that at this point, can he?
Well, he wants to make statements, obviously, to take credit for what he's done. He's also trying to encourage both Israel and Iran to have ceasefire, so he wants to emphasize that as much as possible. But I think everyone knows, Israelis, Iranians, even Donald Trump himself, they know that there's a lot more that we don't know that we'll find out over time. But I do think that he wanted to end the fighting. He wanted to set back Iran's nuclear program. And I also think that if it appears that Iran is now moving to reconstitute its nuclear program, he or Israel will be prepared to strike again.
Yeah, because if this is all correct, that it wasn't as destructive as first thought, surely Israel will be pushing very hard to go back into battle effectively.
That's right. That's right. Israel, I think they launched this because they wanted to have a decisive impact on Iran's ability to present a threat to Iran. On Iran's ability to present a threat to Israel. And they seem to have done a very substantial job on conventional forces. The U.S. appears to have done something on the nuclear side, but as we said, we don't know the extent of the battle damage. And Israel will want to make sure that there is no way that Iran is able to constitute a very serious military threat.
So many people, everywhere hoping that this does lead to some level of peace and some sort of negotiation, particularly between the US and Iran. They've got their red lines, though, haven't they? It's going to require some compromise on one side or the other, or indeed both of them. Do you think, Iran, first of all, will choose to move on that?
Yeah, I do. I think Iran right now is mostly interested in regime survival. And so that's why they are agreeing to a ceasefire, even if their program was set back. They'd rather stay in power and take time and try to rebuild it than to lose power altogether. So I think Iran is prepared to make a few concessions right now with a view towards buying time. And I think Israel, as you indicated, Israel is determined to try to drive this as far as it can. But with President Trump putting pressure on them to say, okay, now it's time to wrap it up, I think Israel may be prepared to do that as long as there's an understanding that they will go back to fighting if Iran violates any sense of abandoning its programs.
We saw Donald Trump, didn't we, early in the morning? I've never seen him criticize Israel in the way that he did this morning. Do you think Israel's very close to pushing America too far?
No, I don't think so. I think Donald Trump emotes that way to make a point, to get people to respond to him. But I think at root, the U.S.-Israel relationship is very strong, and particularly under President Trump, he has been very supportive of Israel. And I think that will continue.
Did you see you would have seen the text that Donald Trump shared with the world with the head of NATO today? It's pretty fawning, wasn't it? And I'm not sure from a European perspective it would have gone down particularly well. Do you think he's discredited?
No, I don't, because I think everybody understands the game. I think that they all know that Trump has a very large ego. He wants to get credit for strengthening NATO, for getting everyone to increase defense spending, wants to get credit for bringing peace in the Middle East. And so to keep Trump happy, to keep him having a positive experience working with NATO, a little bit of flattery like that is part of the game, and I think everyone understands that.
There was an element of truth to it, wasn't there? A clear truth, which is that US presidents have been trying to get Europe to pay more for decades. They haven't achieved it. Donald Trump has, and that is quite an extraordinary achievement.
No, I agree with that. That is very true. If you'll remember, President Bush was complaining about NATO defense spending. President Obama was complaining. In 2014, President Obama managed to get people to commit to 2% of GDP. And 3 years later, when Donald Trump took office, only 3 countries were doing it, one of them the United States. So this has been a very big change now for NATO to have so many countries already spending more than 2%, and everybody committing to get to 5%. Even if implementation falters over time a little bit, this is still a major step forward.
Yeah, Volker, fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Turkish Airlines.
Inside Africa, see a continent in transformation as trailblazers evolve culture, technology, and industry across Africa and beyond. Dig into the landscapes and traditions inspiring a food revolution in Southern Africa.
Every part we eat has a story. Food without a story is.
Inside Africa on CNN in association with Zenith Bank.
Ventures and the boldest investments pushing the continent forward.
They're all required to build a better Africa.
Who will see profits? What opportunities will come? Where will growth take shape?
We're pushing ourselves
And how will it all impact the global economy? We want to provide people with opportunities for them to breathe their best global meaningful careers. Join me, Zain Asha, on Marketplace Africa.
Sunday on CNN. This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
Returning to our exclusive breaking news tonight, Iran's nuclear facilities were not destroyed by the US airstrikes last weekend, and that's according to an early assessment from the US intelligence community. President Trump's Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth have repeatedly insisted that the nuclear sites were obliterated in the strikes, but one intelligence source told CNN that the centrifuges are largely intact. The strikes may have only set Iran's nuclear program back by a matter of months. CNN senior White House correspondent Kristen Holmes is with me. What sort of political reaction are you getting to this and what's happening?
Yes, we fighting.
But we haven't heard from President Trump himself. This, of course, goes directly at odds of what he has been saying. Just to give a little more context here, this was done by the Defense Intelligence Agency, which is the intelligence portion of the Pentagon. Now, the White House itself did acknowledge this, but I do want to read you the statement here so you can understand how they acknowledge this. Press Secretary Carolyn Levitt wrote, "This alleged assessment is flat out wrong."
Ayan so guys, ito na lang tayo guys hanggang sa muli. Balik naman tayo bukas. Mega love shout out sa lahat. Ayan siya kung nakita yung ating balita. So, pakinggan natin ulit bukas. So, hanggang dito na lang tayo guys. Thank you for watching. Thank you for joining us our live. Oh, this one. This is not for microwave. No, it's a microwave. To make spoil. There is small plate for this one.
This is the early assessment based by
Kasaway po guys.
briefed on this assessment, and this could change. We could get more information as we try to look into this, but as you said, and the takeaway here is that Iran still
Yung
has
lata,
the enriched uranium, as well as the centrifuges are still intact. President Trump has continued to say annihilation, obliteration, that everything is gone, that they were set back here.
Big plates, this one I always
intelligence assessments look like.
See,
and we know how fortified
it's fire inside. Oh my goodness.
And one of the things that makes this so fascinating is
burn.
that President Trump himself, when he was making the decision to launch these strikes, spent so much time asking people privately,
I always use this
will
one.
this take out their nuclear
I don't know this
That
one.
was one of the things that he wanted to ensure that they would do, that they wouldn't just waste their time on a strike that wouldn't do anything. And he was assured by the people around him that it would take out these nuclear facilities. So if that is in fact not the case, it would be interesting to see what actually was done here. It's a matter of months in terms of setting back that nuclear program.
So, good night guys sa lahat.
All of this comes in the background.
See you to the next live natin. Bukas naman tayo guys. Thank you for coming. Mega love shout out sa lahat. Bye. Good night all. Bye bye sa lahat.
As the beginning of the strikes, then the ceasefire, as all the beginning of the laying the groundwork for what he wants in the Middle East.